Hello, my name's Jade and today we will be discussing Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo. The third and final book in the Grisha trilogy. The first book being Shadow and Bone and the second book being Siege and Storm. I have videos on both of these and I'll link both of them down below. I wasn't in love with the first two. I enjoyed them and all, but I wasn't overwhelmed by any emotion by either of them. Like, I don't dislike them by any means. I definitely enjoyed reading them and I think the world is really interesting and really cool, and I see a lot of potential in the writing style. And I felt the same way kind of with this one. I wasn't like really disappointed with it or anything. I know that when it was first read, I think a lot of people were disappointed by it. I wasn't necessarily disappointed by it. I kind of felt very similar emotions to how I felt in Siege and Storm. I think I'd give this one, again, either a 6.5 or a 7 out of 10. I definitely think I enjoyed Shadow and Bone the most of the three of them, and I think it might even be arguably the strongest. For me, these two, their potential isn't fully used. There's a lot of things that could be developed further that aren't necessarily. Plot isn't as strong in these two. Like, the second one felt like a filler book to me, and then the third one, it was okay, but I still struggled with it a bit. And I think what it comes down to is just something here that's just not for me. There's something in the writing style I think that's definitely not for me. I was really satisfied with the ending of Ruin and Rising. I did kind of see it coming. I think the ending was really nice, and so that kind of boosts my opinion of this book a little bit, even though throughout a big chunk in the middle I was really struggling. The chapters were really long in Ruin and Rising, especially. I think the chapters were long in all of them, but especially the second two, especially Ruin and Rising, and I don't like long chapters. But more so than that, I just didn't feel connected to the story in the way that I wanted. Not that I didn't care either way, but that I wasn't affected by it. Like, I was okay with everything going to hell. That being said, I'm looking forward to reading the Six of Crows duology, and I'm really looking forward to reading King of Scars. I think that's everything. This was just a very okay, good, but not great trilogy in my mind. Do we want to mention the covers quickly? I feel like I went in a lot of depth in the first one about my overall feeling of the covers and how I prefer the original ones, and there's just a lacking of depth for me in these. I like how the text itself is shiny, and I like the little details in the corners of the books. Lined up, the spines do look nice on the shelf, I will give them that. They are coloured underneath the jackets, and these two have little Russian buildings like imprinted on them. It annoys me how like this one's a muted blue in the background, and so is this one. Really, it's not the same shade of muted blue, but it is a muted blue, and then this one's black. Like, it's not consistent enough for my liking. They're fine, they make sense. I'm now going to go into the spoiler section of Ruin and Rising. If you've yet to read the book, I recommend you leave now or you're going to be spoiled for what happens. Okay, so when we open, we're with the apparat in the White Cathedral. I just remember being so appalled by the apparat, and the longer we spent with him, the more I hated him, the more I needed to get away from him. He was so manipulative and just disgusting and creepy, and I hated him, really. And then we have their little rebellion, and she calls the light for the first time. I grinned at the apparat, letting exultation fill me. A man so obsessed with holy fire should pay more attention to the smoke. That was a fun line. And she burns the hand into Vladimir, that's how you say his name. She's still pretty good at leading, I think. In my Siege and Storm video, I went on and on about how she's really coming into herself and she'd be a great leader and she doesn't belong with Mal. None of that happens, and I think that's why people were maybe disappointed with it. I think they wanted that to happen. I think they wanted her to lead the second army and be not necessarily with Nikolai, but not with Mal. And obviously she ends up powerless and normal and living a very normal life in the end. If she wanted that, I think I'd be okay with it, but I don't think this is what she wanted. It was hard because it was a hard balance, because she was power hungry but not in a good way, but she took to it so well. She was such a good leader, and here when she kind of reinstates her role, and she doesn't really want to burn a handprint into this man, but she knows that's what's necessary to get the job done. She was good at it. She would have been a good leader, and she would have been a really good advisor to Nikolai. She turned that down as well. I don't know why she couldn't like keep up like a secret correspondence with him. Mal shoots, was it like a cockroach that was in the pouch of gunpowder, and that's how he knew where to shoot, because he tracked the cockroach, and to me that was completely unbelievable. It's like, okay, we're taking this tracker thing too far, and no one else suspected that there was more to the tracking thing. I mean, Alina kind of talked about it as if it was some kind of like thing that he couldn't control and he just happened to be, he was just born that way. But like I was constantly second guessing it from the very first book, like why is he so good at tracking? It's the thing, he kind of has like magical abilities where he can hear all of the animals and life around him. I feel like he should have kind of described it at some point. Like that's weird, you shouldn't be able to hear all the life around you, and he never talked about it that way. So they escape through the tunnels and then it nearly collapses at one point. Harshu, I really enjoyed him. He would take orders from his cat. I loved that. I found that so funny. We have a whole kind of troupe of new characters. We get a troupe of new characters in this one. Well, not necessarily all new characters from Siege and Storm, and some even were in Shadow and Bone, but there were so many of them and we didn't spend like enough individual time with them to really separate the personality. And if I sit and think about it, tell you who each one is and their powers and what they're like. When a name would just be mentioned, I like when Arcat had his arm ripped off, is that his name? Arcat, Adcat, the kid. Like I was sat there for a good minute being like, who? It felt like we just have these big chunks of like doing things like escaping from the tunnels. We weren't spending it necessarily with the characters. Like it did feel telly still at times to me. I just struggled with that a little bit. Like in the same way that I didn't feel connected to the Cools. Like there's so much death and majority of the Grisha are dead and even Harakat dies and I was sad, but I didn't care. And I think that's maybe why I wasn't so disappointed with the ending, because I didn't care how it ended. I didn't really like, she could have ended up with the Darkling and I think I would have felt kind of the same way. But then Nikolai comes along and he saves them right as they're about to be like captured by a group of soldiers. I loved when he like intervened and how he's like, I heard he's really handsome. I loved Nikolai just as much in this book as I did in Siege and Storm. I think he's probably my favorite character. He's definitely my favorite character, which is why I'm so excited about King of Scars, because I don't know if it's going to be like completely him. I think we'll probably have other characters and stuff, but we'll see him. We're following him at least some of it, so I'm excited to follow his journey more. Oh my god, I loved his interactions with Bagra, how like they were taunting each other and he was like, feel free to like run away screaming if you need to, Alina. Alina keeps talking about Murzost. Is that how you pronounce it? That's how I'm pronouncing it. So this whole book, has it been mentioned before this book? And it seems like such a big thing, and for the majority of the book I was like, wait, when did this happen? When did we learn this? Did we learn about it? Did we though? Because I don't remember it if we did. Similar thing with something I said in the first book discussion, that there would be these, what I can only assume are Russian inspired names. They wouldn't be described, they're just kind of left there. And you kind of have to put together yourself what it actually means. And I don't know if this Murzos thing is one of those where you got to figure it out for yourself. You have to figure a lot of stuff out for yourself in this. And sometimes I needed the help. Murzos, what the hell is that? I still don't really know. Someone mentioned at one point that some kind of connection between life and death, but then she also uses it to describe her connection with Darkling, doesn't she? It's such a big important part of this book that I don't understand. Is it mentioned? Correct me if I'm wrong and if I missed something, because I'll admit it, but I still don't know what was going on there. Genya faces the king, and I loved that section too. I loved her little speech and how defiant she was. I really like their friendship. I hope they're still friends. See, this is what I don't like about the ending, is that she's now separate from all of them, and I know they visit her, but it's not the same. I really felt for Nikolai, and like when he like said to Alina, you could have given me a heads up. He made a really strong decision. He's the best character. He's the smartest, the coolest, the funniest, the nicest. He's just the best. And I'm glad that he's king now. I think he's gonna be great. Although I feel for him because he's all alone and he's gone through so much. Her ending up with Mal. He did have this little section in here where he kind of redeemed himself, and it's where they have that conversation in her room and he's like, you need to say goodnight to me, because say goodnight, tell me to leave Alina. No, you need an army, you need a crown. I do. He laughed then. I know I'm supposed to say something noble. I want a united Ravka free from the fold. I want the Darkling in the ground where he can never hurt you or anyone else again. He gave a rueful shake of his head, but I guess I'm the same selfish ass I've always been. For all the talk of vows and honour, what I really want to do is push you up against that wall and kiss you until you forget you ever knew another man's name. So tell me to go, Alina, because I can't give you a title or an army or any of the things you need. But he's kind of accepting who she is more. Come the end, he's like, I know I said I wanted to take your power away from it, but I would have never wanted this. I don't like them as a couple still. Like, I like their banter. I like them as friends. I like that they have each other and they have that past and their banter is great. It is what it is. For the most part though, the character arcs were really good. Lena's character arc is insane, what she goes through and the way she changes. She is so different in the last book to how she is in the first book. Genya's character arc, great. David's character, great. I love his little speech and how he finally kissed her and they're writing together. Miles and a little, but it's there. Okay, fine, it's there. The Darklings. This is another of the big things that upsets me with this trilogy. The Darkling had so much potential, and I think he was very underused. I was expecting at least a conversation with him at some point, an attempt of redemption, because he was murky at times, and he was murky in Siege of Storm, and I was really hoping we were going to get this conversation. And I guess in a way it's clever that it's just left murky. You don't know where you stand with him. I would rather know where I stand with him for a long time, but I'm now okay with the murkiness of him, and I think it is cleverly done. But what he wanted wasn't bad. What he wanted was good. What he wanted was more than understandable. And then hearing about Baghra and her story and the way he was brought up, it's so ingrained in him. The way she taught him to want power because everyone was scared of them. That's why he is the way he is. There's no question about it. And I think that Alina saw that. Alina saw the human side in him. Maybe that's why she kept going back to him. She very much felt very drawn to him at times. And at times I really thought they could get together again. And I wasn't against it. Given that we learn more about him and that we kind of really see why he wants to do what he's doing. And I think we could break that down and put him in the right path. We never had that conversation. And I would have really liked to at least seen the conversation. Even if it didn't work and things ended the way they ended, fine. We didn't even try. We didn't try. And I felt like it was there. What I also found to be ironic is that we kind of were thrown into things a lot, and we're not really taught things as fully as I wanted to be taught them. Yeah, still until like halfway through the book we're recapping the things that have happened in the first two. Nikolai gives Alina the family ring, and afterwards there's this section of girl talk, and I really loved that section. And they were all right, how great would it be to have a Grisha queen? And I think that's still in the cards. I think that's where we're gonna go. I don't think he's gonna marry like a politician from any other country. I think it's gonna be a Grisha. I really loved Zoya and Genya's relationship. Their banter was really great throughout the whole of it. They just had these great lines, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more of that. We have the conversation between Alina and the Darkling where she learns about his plans with the glass skiff, and to me it very much felt like Alina nearly gave in to him. You were meant to be my balance, Alina. You're the only person in the world who might rule with me, who might keep my power in check. Like, I could see it, and I don't necessarily out and out believe him because I think he's crazy, but I could see it. I could believe these things that he's saying. I think it's very underexplored. When she tells Nikolai she can converse with the Darkling. I don't know if she mentioned back to Mal's reaction. I think she does at some point. I don't think it's here though. How she's kind of scared about telling other people because the way Mal reacted. And his reaction was so much better than Mal's reaction. I was like, see, if this doesn't mean he's right for her, what does? We have the meteor shower, and it was heartbreaking to see that Mal wanted to come and show her. But Alina also talks about how their marriage would be purely political. When there was that section, that's kind of when I made my peace with the fact that they're really not gonna get together. That's not how this is gonna play out. Baghra tells us her history, finally. I was wondering if Morozova was her husband and the Darkling was his kid. It's not. Baghra is his kid, and she was the first Darkling ever. And they mention how there's no distinctions between Grisha before this. Like with Genya, she could have been matriarchy, and how she was kind of in between. She wasn't really either of them. Like, I think that to me is really interesting, and I was expecting people to end up with all kinds of abilities. Morozova himself was a mixture of healer and fabricator, much like Genya. I don't know, I feel like there was potential there for us to end up going down that route. Things that she heard before and she would repeat them back, that was very cleverly done. At one point, the Darkling said like how he lives in 1,000 moments where she only lives in one. Like, it referenced back to when Baghra said, are we not all things? Or maybe when Morozova said it, are we not all things? Like that. Like, felt like it was leading down the path that you could develop more than one different Grisha ability. And like how they choose their Grisha abilities and stuff like that, I'm still not clear on. I think that would be really interesting to find out. And it was her sister that died, it wasn't a boy, and they both got plunged into the river. Baghra suspects that Morozova survived, and that's why the Firebird was able to become an amplifier still. Alina suspects that she's the descendant of Baghra's sister, and that she wasn't non-Grisha at all, that she was a Grisha, she was a Sun Summoner, and they just never knew. Which I thought was very believable. Like, how did the Sun Summoners come about if not through that? Like, why is Alina a Sun Summoner? How did this happen? Like, it all felt so, like, they call it the small science, it all feels so plausible with how Baghra was the first Darkling because he was dabbling with Murzoth. Like, Alina just kind of randomly appears. I can't remember if it was the same time as the meteor shower, if it was just after, but her shoulder twinges. And then, of course, all these shadow people just like burst in and the Darkling comes down. I was like, why have we not learned? When your shadow hurts or twinges or anything, it's got something to do with the Darkling and you should be ready for attack. Like, I picked this up in the middle of Siege and Storm. How have you not caught on yet? And I was so upset when Nikolai turned into that creature and flew away. I was so worried that we weren't going to see him again. And Bardugo sacrifices herself. It was very cleverly set up about how the Darkling thought that meant fight, but Alina knew that Bardugo's always been telling her to run. Okay, fasting forward, we find the Firebird. It attacks them. Find out that Mal is the third and final amplifier. He is the descendant of Bagra's sister. And that is why the tracking thing is the way it is. And that was what happened in Siege and Storm, the little spark between the two of them. And when he puts his hand on her wrist, they feel this spark. Why did they not try and like him hold on to her, and like it felt like that gave her a boost of power, did it not? So why could he not just like hold on to her wrist the whole time throughout that battle and like use him as a living amplifier? We didn't even entertain the possibility. We just thought, okay, he has to die because that's the way amplifiers work. But if he's jolting you while he's alive, then like why didn't we explore that route? No. She kills him. The Darkling attacked West Kavra and Karazmin while they were away. He's destroyed the orphanage and all the people were hanging in the tree, and he's got the children, the students as hostages, and that was really sad. And I was like, okay, well, there's no redeeming him now. Like, I don't understand why people love him so much. Like, if we had that attempt at redemption, like, I can see it because it felt like he could be redeemed, but he wasn't. He just kept doing these horrible things. Alina contemplates in the fight, when she finds out the students aren't actually there, that he's not this like horrific, merciless, really cruel person. That's just what he wants her to think. He wants her to think of him as a monster so he can manipulate her. He was just so manipulative of her. It just, Like she says, that doesn't excuse the fact that he still did it. I love how Nikolai swooped in the battle and saved Tamar, and he like helped out. Like every time I would visit him and he would visit her, it just broke my heart a little bit. Like that section where she just kind of crumpled in the grass. There were so many moments where Alina just was like completely broken in this book. Maybe that foreshadows the end. So we're in the fight and she gets shot. I'm assuming that was just by weird random luck. I can't help but think if she wasn't shot, things could have gone so differently. Like none of this would have had to happen. If she wasn't shot, she could still use her power on the Darkling. She could have still potentially killed him before she would have had to kill Mal. Because it was the death of Mal and the Darkling that ultimately broke her, I think, and that made her decide that she wanted to die as well. She kills Mal, she loses her ability, all of the normal people, the non-Grisha in and around the area, turn into sun summoners, and this is kind of left. We don't really know if the power is permanent. Don't acknowledge that they might be a part of the second army. Like, in the end we have Ganya, David and Zoya as the three leaders of the second army, and I love that. And I think that healthy relationship we were looking for in Siege and Storm, all of this stuff I was kind of prophesizing with her, can still happen, just with different people in a different way. But we don't acknowledge that the Sun Summoners might be a part of the Grisha too, and that they can help lead. Like, there's no spot for them there. And her collar and her fetter have fallen off, and just, I don't know, killing Mal somehow strips her of her power. And it did make sense about how like his wife and his daughter were playing, and then that's why this all came to be. And it did make some sense, but then why did she need to lose her power? Maybe it was explained and I just don't remember it because it didn't stick very well. And then she kills the Darkling, and it was such an ordinary way. She just like stabbed him in the heart. I mean, that, if that's not a metaphor, I don't know what is. It felt very right for him to die in such an ordinary way, and like the way he was like, he told her you're nothing now. That was harsh. And it was clever the way that she like concealed the blade in shadows, her like little parlor trick, the last remnants of her power, and it's his. Throughout the whole of the first two books, I was wondering like, does he have a name? I think I thought of it pretty early on in the first book, like why is he just the Darkling? Why doesn't he have a name? I assumed he just didn't have one, he was just born the Darkling. He has a name, it's Alexander, and I really like that she stayed with him and she promised him the merciful things, that she wasn't going to bury him in a marked grave, and she said his name one last time. Because again, I felt bad for him because it could have turned out differently if we just tried to connect to women a different way. And I love her little conversation with Nikolai at the very end, and how he lets her keep the ring, and all the scenarios he was playing out was so nice, and he's called the King of Scars. I feel really bad for him because he's alone, and I think he's going to be in a low place when we see him in King of Scars. And it makes me nervous that the Apparat is still around, that he's working with him because they need his alliance. Ugh, I'm not looking forward to that aspect. They burn her, and she says Alexander's name because no one else knew him. It was really touching. And then of course we have the whole section after it where they're normal people now. I forgot that she still had white hair as well. everyone else in the orphanage kind of talks down upon them and thinks they're weird, but I think they're running it, aren't they? I guess they sold the ring and bought it or something, and the way they raise the children is much more different now, but it was very bittersweet the way she had the blue kefta from Zoya, and she was so emotionally affected by the way that Zoya called her one of them. Still, she was always going to be one of them, and the way she kind of left her hands in the windowsill with the sun, it felt like she still wanted to be Grisha. The bad hour fades away and they're okay because they're together, blah 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 blah. They just felt very cut off from everyone else. Like the way that they got married with only Misha as a witness. Like, why didn't you invite everyone else? Like, are they not your friends? I really liked her friendship with Tamar and Genya and Nikolai. That being said, I was left satisfied with the end, feeling a lot of kind of happy emotion towards the book. I'm really invested in the world and I'm looking forward to reading more in it. It's so in my mind that we have King of Scars, and I think if we didn't have King of Scars, I would have a lot more problems. Shadow and Bone is still my favourite of the three, and I don't know between these two. I've been going back and forth. I think this one's the stronger one of the two of them, but I also struggled the most with this one because of the chapter length. I think they're about even in my brain. I think if I were to prefer one, it might be Ruin and Rising a little bit. And that is the Grisha trilogy. If you have any thoughts or opinions on the trilogy or any of the books, please let me know down below. I'd love to hear them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing morning, afternoon, evening / night. My name's Jade. I hope I see you again next time. Goodbye!